Hello and welcome to the Front Row Back Row podcast presented by PhysioGrowth. My name is Dr. Owen Campbell. I'm the owner of Simplify Motion Physical Therapy. With me, as always, is Dr. Brian Wolf, owner of Evolution PT and Fitness in Connecticut and Long Island. And we have a special guest today. With us is Paul Singh. He is the CEO of StrataPT. And I am super jacked to have you on this podcast, Paul. How you doing?
Thanks for having me, man. Just so that we're all clear, much to my Indian parents' dismay, I am not a doctor of anything. So, so your audience probably needs to tune out right now. But yeah, anyway, my name's Paul Singh. I always tell people I wear two hats. One is I'm the CEO of a company called StrataPT, and the other is I do a lot of aggressive angel investing in the tech space, invest in a little over 3,000 companies. And I don't know if we'll touch on it today, but I think there's a lot of overlap between the tech industry and the healthcare industry. And I think there's a lot of opportunity for smart clinic owners to ride that wave and make some money.
And I love hearing that. And I know we were able to chat a little bit in the pre-show about Paul's background, but I love the fact that the PT tent is bringing in more minds like this, right? Someone like Paul is attracted and saying, "How can I help this? How can I fix it? What are some things to look at a different perspective?" And as listeners, regular listeners to this podcast know, we tend to be a little bit not like the other guys. And the one of the things that I think that's really important to, and I think you did touch on it really well, is that you have that outside perspective, which can really help. And our main goal is to help young, maybe not young, but like maybe new or growing or sometimes even more established people make more money, right? We think that if you can make money as a physical therapist, we have a bigger seat at the table. We can start arguing for reimbursement rates. We can do all the stuff that happens when you have more power. So I just love to hear what you're doing out there for PTs. And yeah, just what are like, tell us about what you're doing to help us.
Okay, well, that's a broad question. Well, keep me honest here. Let me first say that my little disclaimer for this show is, at face value, it's going to sound like I'm super cynical and being a total asshole to everybody, but I've spent my whole life, with a bit of a chip on my shoulder. And I learned very early, like I had this idea in my head early on. I think, I grew up going to school just like you guys did here in the US, I'm sure, where it's like you grow up learning, school teaches you like you got to work hard and you got to do this and you got to do that. And I could never really reconcile this with the idea that, like, I was learning about entrepreneurship and entrepreneurs. And when I was growing up, the big name here in Virginia where I live was AOL and Steve Case. And I couldn't reconcile the fact that, like, their success at AOL was not, I mean, they would say openly, was not a function of how much they worked. It was about how many things they tried. And therefore that enabled them to then stumble across better ways to do certain things. And that had a compounding effect. And so I'm not articulating it very well, but I guess my point is, though, is that, like, I spent my whole life with this chip on my shoulder and sort of this desire to be unemployable, much to my
I
parents'
love it.
You
dismay.
said unemployable.
Yeah, yeah.
That's awesome.
Paul, something you said, and we talked about it in the pre-show, right? The three of us, and I think it's part of that process you were talking about in healthcare, is that I think a lot of people are really afraid to fail, right? And a lot of times the threshold for being afraid of failure is so small that people don't even realize how big they can go, right? Like me, and talking about that, the number one reason why people don't start businesses is because they're afraid they're going to fail and that people are going to judge them on it. And I'm like, that's crazy. That's the number one reason for why people don't do stuff, right? And you kind of touched about that in the pre-show. So talk about that. Like, you've had run-ins with people in the healthcare industry that are like, we got to go through a million different processes and we got to, like, do all these things. I mean, I think that's something that holds people back. It's paralysis by analysis, right? And that's something that crushes the healthcare industry in general.
Well, I think, I want to be respectful of the listener's time here, but I guess I would just say, to kind of keep it punchy, I would say that, first of all, fear of failure is such a worthless utilization of your time. Like, rhetorical question for anybody listening to this: name one company in your hometown or wherever you live that failed in the last year. You probably can't even mention one. Nobody gives a shit.
Yeah.
Yeah,
But
it's
like
true.
in our own mind, like we're like, oh man, if I fail, like what will everybody think? Nobody cares. Nobody
Yeah.
gives a shit.
Yeah.
Okay. So there's your Indian Tony Robbins of the day, stop worrying about failure. I think the other side of it though, more seriously though, is that look, I think let's and you guys are the guys that are trained in this. You guys are doctors, so tell me if I'm wrong here. That I went to higher education and got a electrical engineering degree and a computer science degree. You guys went into healthcare, and I would think that the type of mind that gravitates towards that kind of training cares about people. It's a zero fail kind of environment, right? Because we don't want you to hurt the patient more. And so these are not bad things, by the way, but I just point them out as like these are foundational things. The people that go through these trainings and then ultimately become our healthcare providers, they are trained a certain way. Now, with that being said, though, I don't think they should change. I don't want my PT to be, thinking entrepreneurially about how to fix my knee for my next
So true.
marathon. you know,
So well
Yeah.
said.
but I do think that, I think that more clinic owners and PTs in this industry right now need to learn how to wear two hats. So I'm a visual guy. So I think about like the proverbial hat. You gotta, in this particular industry, you gotta learn to take off the PT hat every once in a while and put on the entrepreneur hat. Because the thing about it is that, the fact, here's the blunt thing here. If this business was truly this bad, if it was truly such an unprofitable business, if it was truly, if there were truly so few dollars in PT, then why would private equity be rolling up chains left and right?
Yeah.
Why would millions of dollars be going into tech startups? Why would billions of dollars be going into private equity to roll up these things? Why is Physical and all these other chains trying to open up another 100 locations every year?
Yeah.
The point
And
is that it's a great business to be in.
and
It's a-
that's why we run this podcast, right? Is that I think that the average PT is in the PT mode, right? Where we were originally a branch of nursing in the United States. We were always, yes, doctor, give me that referral, doctor. How can I help you, sir, ma'am, whatever. And we were always very much like, well, we must be compassionate. If we're not the most compassionate person in the room, then we are the fraud, right? And that is probably one of the worst attitudes you can have when you're trying to sell somebody who doesn't
yeah,
think their shoulder needs PT. It's okay. I'll just like rub some ointment on it or something. The
yeah,
worst attitude you can have in the world is, oh, well, yeah, I guess that's a good opinion from you, sir. Please tell me more. Like, no, you have to be convincing that, yes, this is the research. This is why we're better. And this is why you need to give me your money so
yeah,
that I can do this for you and feed my family. Right. So I
yeah.
think that us, especially in America, and I can't speak to the other areas where PT is really a big part of the healthcare system, but that is, we are coming out of that darkness. We are coming out of the woods at this point where we're getting the cash pay PT movement, the solopreneurs. People are realizing, wait, I can make $175 an hour or $175 a patient versus 25, right?
Yeah. Yeah.
Those are the things that are happening now. And you're dealing with all these people coming out of the woods looking around, and man, they need some sunglasses. They need
Well,
something because
I
you
love
need
where
that.
you're going. Yeah, I mean, I love where you're going with this. But do you guys remember there used to be this like meme? There was a time, how I mean, I got a bunch of kids, so I get memes all day, right? But
There you go.
there was this like meme a couple years ago where it was like a hillside at a concert, and then like one guy starts dancing, and everybody looks at him and funny. And then like three people start dancing, and then everybody's like kind of looking at each other, and then all of a sudden the whole damn side of the hill is dancing. Do you remember that?
Yeah.
Uh-huh.
So here's where I'm going with this. I think constructively what I would say back to you as a opposing opinion, I suppose, is I don't think we need to convince anybody that we need to do better, get more money.
Mhm.
I think if even one person listening to this podcast says, yeah, I should make 5 million bucks a year or 10
Mhm.
million or 1 million, whatever the FU number is, that's
Yep.
enough. Because if we can get that one person to do it, they become the role model for the next 5 or 10 practice owners around them. You and I both know, all of us know, we all hang out with our business peers anyway, right?
Yeah. Oh yeah.
And so, like, what we say in the finance world on the venture side of things is that there is no alpha, there's no upside in consensus-based thinking. Like by the time you and I agree that a potential investment is a good idea, it's so obvious that everybody thinks it's a good idea. There's no money to be made in that. So you
Yep.
actually have to just get one person, one practice to go. And then all of a sudden it quickly evolves to we. So
Yeah.
Again, I
I
feel like
no,
I'm being Tony Robbins here,
That's
but
a very
no,
very
I
interesting
agree.
point. You know what I mean? Because I feel like a lot of times what'll happen is like, people will be like, I don't know, am I ready? Should I wait for somebody? Blah blah. And before you know it, like 10 years has passed, right?
Mm.
In this way, and all of a sudden, like someone's already way ahead. And what
oh
happened?
yeah,
Your point now, there's no money. Like there's the opportunities missed. And so I think to your point, I love the idea of the psychology of that, because I think a lot of people, especially with I never thought of it that way from like the training perspective. Like a lot of our training is in do no harm, do no harm, do no harm. But we're talking about
yeah,
that process. And I think that's something that your brain just has to shut off for, at least to a certain degree, when it comes to that, like quote unquote risk taking, or that, like starting my business, or starting like a big one for me, Paul, that I want to help with in our profession are people who work for professional, like other places, like physical therapy places, but can develop programs within in their company to develop more money, right? Like there are so many people that can, like, particularly within an organization like ours that takes insurance. We also build a lot of cash pay, like revenue building, like processes and parts of our business to make it more robust, to make it more stable, right? And then again, like getting people involved in that to start those programs. There's
yeah.
so many skill sets. They just need to learn to do that. And so to your point, it's like taking that hat off for a second and be like, I got to put myself out there about I might fail this a few times before it really starts to take off. And it's just my time and my work and my effort that I got to put in.
I will go on the record and say that the number one reason why most clinics aren't as successful as they can be is solely the practice owner's own mindset.
Yeah.
Yep.
And I know this is not the psychiatrist or psychologist podcast or whatever, but if we're talking about making money, what we need to understand is that, like, all of us as humans, really as a species, we have these deeply ingrained sort of invisible scripts in our mind. Let me just be even more direct. The amount of money we have in the bank does not change how we feel about money. And the
Mm.
sooner we address that issue at the individual level, the sooner you actually can kind of stop making excuses for making more money and start like stacking it up, you know?
Yeah.
And I'll just give you a bad example here, by the way. So these are called invisible scripts.
Mm.
I'm an Indian guy. I grew up, my parents are both Indian. I came here, right?
Yeah.
And like, tell me if I'm wrong. You guys are the doctors. Genetically, is there really much difference between me and a black guy and a white guy and an Asian guy genetically?
No.
Probably not, right?
No.
Okay, so in my mind, I always wondered while I was growing up, I was like, why is it that like Indian kids are always skinny, older Indian dads are like fat, but like the black guys at my school are athletes, the white guys are super smart. I don't think it's because of genetics. Okay, maybe some of it was, right? I think it was invisible scripts. And now I'm going to get like
Mm.
canceled for some reason here, I'm sure. But, cancel me, not the podcast. But here's the thing. The minute I learned that all I really had to think about was macros for nutrition and, training like for marathons or lifting on the weight rack or whatever, I could have those things too.
Yeah.
And you come to
Yeah.
realize with that basic idea there that like I was the barrier. I thought that I
Yeah.
couldn't be those things, you
Mhm.
know. Look, I'm never going to be Dwayne Johnson, right? But I don't
Yeah.
need to be that.
Well,
Um,
and to your point, right? That I think what you're talking about is that culturally there's different. People are segregated out into cultures, and then they do what they do, and a lot of anything that you do and that you go through in business is about your past experiences,
yeah,
right?
yeah,
And if you've had a past experience that has been very positive around money, entrepreneurial, did this, that, the other, and then we were able, my dad did X and my mom did Y, and it was all entrepreneurial. I always kind of joke with Brian, but I came from the least entrepreneurial family. My mom was a nurse and my dad was a postal worker for 30 years, right? Those two huge influences in my life both told me, why are you trying to start something? You're going to fail, right? And that mindset that I grew up in my family with, honestly, it held me back because Brian can tell you in class because the whole point of the front row back row podcast is I sat in the back row, Brian sat in the front row when we went to college 14 years ago. Brian can tell you I was talking entrepreneurship 14 years ago, but what was holding me back was those priors,
You know
right?
what's funny? Yeah. You know what's funny about this, by the way? So I grew up speaking in a multilingual household, right?
Yeah,
So here's the crazy part. Believe it or not, the English language is the only one that I'm aware of that lists the word entrepreneur as a noun. In this culture, this society, and in this language, we view entrepreneurship as something you are or are not. It is something you do or you do not. In nearly every other language, Hindi, Mandarin, Punjabi, Portuguese, Spanish, whatever, the closest literal translations are verbs. So in India, for example, we don't say
That's
that
cool.
person is an entrepreneur. We say that person has like the literal English translation. Like we'd say that person has like the hustle, like they think a
Yeah.
certain way. My mom was a teller at Navy Federal Credit Union. My dad
Yeah.
was a bricklayer. They would not describe themselves as entrepreneurs, but the way they think in hindsight was always entrepreneurial.
And
Hey,
I
if I
think
do this, could I get that? If I do that, I can get that. If I don't do that, then I can avoid that, you know?
Yeah. And I think that gets back to what we talked about at the beginning of this episode of why are PTs so hesitant to make those sales calls and do the dirty work of, yeah, if I call 15 people and I get, thrown off by 14, but I still get that one, then I spent a lot of good time and money, is that we don't identify as entrepreneurs, we identify as PTs first. And I think when you were talking about before, those two different hats, right? The good PT entrepreneurs and
Yeah.
healthcare entrepreneurs can take one on and get into that entrepreneur mindset, right? And then
Yeah.
boom, take it right off when they walk into the
Yeah.
patient room. And now they're the PT.
Yeah. Look, on this particular topic, I think that if more practices viewed themselves as media and marketing companies that happen to deliver patient outcomes, everybody would make a lot more money and a lot more patients would be
Ah,
happy.
okay.
Very interesting.
But
Makes sense.
instead, I think that like if I put like 6 beers in a PT or a practice owner and I said, "Tell me what you thought starting your practice was going to be like," they'd probably say something like, "Yeah, I thought I'd just like kind of get my license and da 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 and put the shingle out and I'm a doctor." Of course, they would come to me.
Uh-huh.
Yeah, I think
I've
there's
heard,
a
I've
lot.
heard that a lot.
There's a lot of
If that was true, Papa John's wouldn't be advertising. Hell, if that was
yeah,
true, we wouldn't see Coca-Cola ads at the Super Bowl.
Yep.
You
yeah.
know,
You're
come
100%
on.
right. There's a misnomer around the build it and they will come, right? Like, oh, I'll just get this, then I'll get a great job, or I'll just get this, and honestly, you want to get in a big like a big conversation around it, right? You know what I'm talking about? Is
Yep.
I think that happens a lot with college in general, right? Like, oh, if I go to college and become the doctor, like there's some comedians, I can't remember his name, but he'll talk about how he's like, I became a doctor because of the prestige, right? Like that's what my parents wanted, the
Yeah,
prestige. I got to go help people, right?
yeah,
Like
yeah,
it's
yeah,
like the
yeah,
whole
yeah.
the whole point is like a lot of people I think go to college to get the degree and then they're like, well, now what? And so, well, now you go do what's next, right? And I think when you're thinking from that, I love that idea of the verb for entrepreneurship because I think when it comes to that mindset, like I remember saying in college, like, I want to start my own practice. I want to do that at some point. And then I remember what was the tipping point was I realized, why am I doing this for other people? Like when I can just do this on my own. Right. And then I learned and grind and did what I need to do. And like to your point, the hustle mentality was always kind of there.
You know what's funny to me, by the way, and by the way, you guys got to rein me in. I'm like a weird squirrel just jumping around on topics here. But
You're good, dude. Go.
here's the thing. So like people were always like, "Oh, Paul, it must be so much easier on the tech side of things. You know, why'd you come in?" I'm like, first of all, PTs didn't bring me into this industry. Like
Mhm.
every PT told me I did some diligence in this industry before I actually stepped in. I called up a bunch of my old college buddies that became PTs and was like, "Hey, I'm going to do this thing, jump into this thing. What do you think?" And they all were like, "This sucks. Don't do it. This industry sucks." You know.
Mhm.
And I would be like, "Well, why?" And they're like, "Well, your tech world is a lot easier." I'm like, "Are you kidding? We have to invest in stuff to not only create a product, but then to create a market for it."
Yep.
Yeah. Yeah,
Yeah.
exactly. It's
I mean,
innovative.
that's what
Conversely, healthcare, you got people that like people will spend money on their health if you want to if
Mhm.
you want to just talk cash pay. On top of
Yeah.
that, you've got massive healthcare companies that make money on providing healthcare. You got payers
Mhm.
that have massive amounts of money to pay for healthcare.
Yeah.
This is not a market creation problem. This is a market share, land grab problem. Two
Yep.
very different things here. So like when I look at like put aside my business for a moment. When I think about practice ownership, it's really about creating a local land grab
Mhm.
within whatever geography and niche you service.
Yeah.
This is
And
not, you
that's
don't need to
You're right.
innovate on the business model. You need to
You know
innovate on the
what
marketing side.
one
Yeah,
thing that
imagine if we had to convince people PT was a profession and that after surgery you should have it. I mean, that's what tech has to do, right?
Right.
yeah.
And
Yeah.
like, so
Yeah.
we're already far ahead on that.
Yeah. Yeah,
But yeah,
I mean,
Brian.
think about I know it's a cliche, but think about Netflix, right? Like everybody was used to going to Blockbuster wait, I pay an internet company to have it mail a CD to me? Why would I do that? That you had to convince,
Yeah.
that was a hard lift,
Yeah. Yeah.
Yeah.
right?
I remember too, and to your point about the Netflix, I remember when people would mail the CDs to you, right? Like to age
Right.
ourselves, right? To mail the CDs. And I remember when they were like, "We'll put this stuff online," and I was like, "Yeah, but that online content they have is not very good." And then they obviously now they're creating their own content and they're creating their own stuff,
Yeah.
right? So it's the interesting part about the tech. I never thought of it that way, the way you just talked about that. And I think I remember one thing that I had in my mind. I was like, "How am I going to start this big practice with all these other practices around, right? Like, how am I going to claw out my side of the market
Yeah.
share?" And then what it was it was just one swipe at a time, right? It was just one week, 1
Okay.
month,
All
one
right.
1 year at a
You,
time, right?
man, you guys are going to regret having me on this episode, but now I got to say this. Okay. So, like, okay, before anybody tunes out, just give me 30 seconds before you tune out here for a second. I'm going to be a bit of an asshole. I'm not smarter than anybody else. I don't actually work harder than anybody else. But like the fact is, I believe there's 3 rules. I think there's a game people play. The game that we're all taught in school is work hard, you'll get rewarded for it. Okay.
Mhm.
Well, I don't know about you. There's no pensions in my world.
Yeah. Yeah, yeah.
Lord knows if Social Security be around.
Yeah.
Like we're not back in India anymore. My kids aren't going to take care of me, right? Like we're all on our own. Nobody's coming to help us, right?
Yep.
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 But yet people seem to succeed. So I believe there's this invisible game. And what I'm about to say has no rules in science, no backing in science, nothing, but I can attribute billions of dollars of my success to these 3 rules of the invisible game. Let me say them and then I'll explain them because I think, Brian, to your point, this is what I really think we can use to apply to like these local practices. Rule number 1 of the invisible game is you never fight the elephant head on.
Yeah.
Okay.
Rule number 2 of the invisible game is if you understand your customers' hopes, fears, and dreams better than they do, better than they can even describe them, right? You win.
Yep.
And now I'm totally brain farting on rule number 3, but we'll come back to it in a minute here. But here's the point. Like when you start a new business, let's just use your example about starting a new practice, right? According to rule number 1, you do not like compare yourself to the other competitor. That is a losing proposition because those guys,
Totally.
if they're smart, will just bleed you out. They'll make fun of you. They'll laugh at you. You'll lose a lot of cycles in your brain and it just sucks.
Yeah.
You're better off like not competing with the elephant head on. Number 2, I think it's important, and then according to rule number 2, it's important to understand why should people want to come to you? Well, what do you like to do, right? Like, for example, as a dad of 4, man, if I don't want to grunt, the dad grunt, like when you pick something up, if
Yeah.
I'm
Yep.
optimizing for that, I'm willing to pay for that. And if you're telling me like here's a better outcome, I don't care. I don't know what that means. I just want to like talk to me with what I want. Right. What I want is
Yeah.
so you said something, one of you guys said something earlier of like, hey, here's the service we provide, pay me my money. I'm happy to pay as long as you say something like, hey, Paul, listen, I think we've got a plan to help you stop making those grunts and to make you like be able to kick your kids' butts, and be athletic in your 50s if you really want to. It's going to cost this much money to do it. Are you in? Like that's a more
Yeah.
compelling proposition than we'll
For
get you a
sure.
better outcome. Here are my credentials,
Uh,
and I'll remember rule number 3 here in a minute. But the
We,
point is, this game of entrepreneurial thinking is not about head on. Like I think people watch too much Shark Tank and then think that that's what it's about. Like, oh, I got to build a practice and then innovate and come up with some new product. Like, no, man.
well,
You
I
just
could.
need to
I
make
can.
something people want and then make sure they understand it's you that delivers it.
me and Owen were just talking about this with a client. We're talking about the
I was.
hot
I was
leads
gonna
versus
say. I could. I
closing.
could see. I could see
Yes.
Brian getting excited in his chair
Yeah.
because this is
Because
all.
literally,
We talk a lot about perfect patient and delivering what
yeah.
they need, and oh, it's
And
fantastic.
because I think, Paul, one of the things that's misnomer is, particularly as me and Owen have been talking a lot on these podcasts, is like what's the difference between a lead and closing, right? And I joke that the close is once the money's in the account, right? Like that's the close. And so to your point of like when someone says, kind of like we were just talking about one of the episodes earlier, Owen, was like when someone's like, I just got to think about it, it means you're just not sure about what your product is. That's it, and what it does for them. So it's like if you can be super clear and be like, this is what it is, very direct, like this is what we can do for you. This is how we're going to fix it. And this is what it's going to cost to do it. Are you in?
Yeah.
And just
Yeah.
wait and let them make the decision. Then you're done. Right. And that's the sales pitch and the close.
The thing about like the PT world though is you guys are tell me, I mean, again, I don't know the lingo, right? But you guys are trained with bedside manner. You know how to talk to people.
Mhm.
That is a skill that is so differentiated from the tech world that I come from. I mean, I'd have to do like media training for tech nerds to get them to like not say the wrong thing to somebody.
Yeah.
But this PT industry, like you guys know how to talk to humans. The only thing that I wish that more clinic owners would do is utilize that. You know,
Yeah.
like
We have to sell exercise. I mean, just selling exercise to someone in pain. That's literally what we do
Yeah.
from day one.
You
And
nailed it,
that's what
Paulo.
that's what we tell people. It's like you can sell exercise to someone
But
in pain. You're probably decent at
yeah.
selling.
Yeah, like
here's a
see this industry, it's so fashionable now to talk about things. Okay, so let me talk about for a second. Let me talk about fake work because there's a lot of fake work in the PT ownership world right now. Examples of fake work is painting a boogeyman. Well, who's the boogeyman? Now, the boogeyman is the insurance payers, or the boogeyman is cash pay versus insurance, or the boogeyman is cancel rates. Okay, that's all fake work. It's important, but those are optimization problems. The
Yeah.
real problem most companies have is they just need to like figure out how to get in front of patients and make sure like they specialize and like let's do real work. Real work is how do I get more people in my area to know that I exist and what service I provide? You know, like it's a distribution problem, it's an awareness problem. That's real work that most practice owners need to do. All this other stuff, these are optimization problems that you can handle when you have patience.
100%.
Mhm.
Paul, I literally preach this with physio growth and what we're trying to do. It's creating an offer, getting leads, and selling your offer. It's that
Yeah,
simple. Like it's no, and then again to your point, it's like once you hit like $1 million a year in money coming into the business, now we start talking about optimization, right? And start doing that because now you've reached that early adopter critical mass where now you're going to start getting more people without having to think about like all about marketing and how to get more people. And now you can
right.
actually start optimizing and doing that. And then it should help more and more as you grow. Right. And
That's
so
right.
you're,
That's right.
you're 100% right. And that's how most PTs from the get-go should win over time. It's just by doing the simple things really, really well consistently.
I mean, every industry analyst out there all says the same thing. You know, the PT industry is worth billions of dollars and is going to continue to grow year over year. Like this industry is already big in terms of dollars and continually compounding its growth annually for the foreseeable future. And
Mhm.
like I just find it ironic that while that's true in this industry, everybody spends all their time just fake working themselves into a tizzy
Yeah.
instead
Yeah.
of just stacking their money and helping patients along the way, you know?
Yeah.
Um,
Yeah, I
so
I I 100% agree, and I got to say, just having you on, Paul, has been a breath of fresh air because
For sure.
we have been talking about this, and we're just like, yeah, this is what works for us, and works for Brian, and worked for me, and and to have somebody from outside to come in and be like, yeah, this is just what's normal for people. This is what this is business, man. I love it. I love having you on. I am so pumped that we got you, and thank you, man.
hey, no, you got it. Look, I'm an entrepreneur, and or sorry, I think like entrepreneurially, and I guess what I would say is like I find it more energizing to talk about like things, one thing that would have to go right, or one thing that could be interesting, rather than wasting all our time about the 87 things out of our control, like payer cuts and this and that and whatever, right? So
Yep.
let's just crazy idea. I wear an Apple Watch. I run every day.
Mhm.
My watch right now tells me, I think the other day it was like, I got a little alert that said, hey, your gait has changed. You're favoring your, it said it in a much more cool way, but it was like, you're
Yep.
favoring your right side. Don't forget to call your healthcare provider. And I was like, man, why didn't my local PT call me first? Like my watch
Yeah.
told me to do that. But, and guess what? I didn't do a damn thing about it
Mm.
because I'm busy. I got kids, I got stuff, right? But I care about running. I invest in it every day. Nike is right there taking my money for my shoes every 90 days. Lululemon's right there taking my money for shorts and t-shirts for no reason. They're not shy about taking their money.
Mhm.
But my PT over here has no idea about the fact that my watch is telling me like, hey man, you need to take care of this. Like why aren't we talking about that? You
Yeah.
know?
Yeah.
That's
And
the cool stuff that excites me. And that's where I think, by the way, I think healthcare is going is that like, we're buying more and more smartwatches for our elderly. I bought some for my parents and my in-laws, we got the fall protection on and it already calls 911 when something happens. But I think one of the next big innovations is going to be somehow notifying your PT And having that PT then say, hey, I saw this happen. Come on in today, tomorrow, whatever. And then keep calling you because it really is about that better outcome.
Think about
Like,
that as a hot lead. My
I
Lord, that
love
would
it.
be perfect.
That's
right?
so true.
Right. I mean, here's the thing, right? It's like we all we all want to like position ourselves, as much as we care what other people think. We all want to like people to think we're smart and, good people. And I think by and large, we all are, right? But we have all spent stupid money on stupid things. And the idea of spending money on our health, I think, is paramount. As long
Yeah.
as we know it's about our health. Do you know what I'm saying? Like,
Mhm.
like I'll blow $100 on a new running outfit easy without thinking about it. I'll blow $200 on a new pair of racing shoes without thinking about it. And depending on whether I'm hurt or I want to hit a PR, if there was a PT that was like, hey, I can build you that plan,
Yeah.
I'm willing to pay for that. And it's not pennies, and that's just on the cash pay side. So there's a blog post out there that for your listeners that are jiving with this idea. There's one of my favorite blog posts about this is a concept called if you Google 1,000 true fans, like FANS. It's a blog post that's been updated year over year or whatever, and it's a really short read, probably takes 2 minutes. And what he argues is this idea that like we don't need to have a billion users. You're not Facebook, right? Physical therapy is not Facebook. You don't need a billion active users. But if you could find a way to create a service that at least 1,000 other people would need, and then find a way to promote that service in front of 1,000 people that need what you deliver, you're going to make a great amount of money. Like that's basically the gist of the article. And like if that article doesn't convince you, I don't know what to tell you. It's like keep scrolling Instagram for your promotion, your inspirational quotes or whatever. But let's stop playing business and
execute.
And,
Execute.
Awesome.
Have a vision, execute, right? It's so true.
Yeah. Like, why
That's
not you? Somebody said to me the other day, like, I was talking to one of the younger guys in my extended family, and he was like, well, I don't think I should be okay. Like, I'm not the guy to do this or whatever. And I was like, why not you?
Yeah.
And I don't know where that went with him, but
Mindset.
I could see his gears started turning. Like, why not you? Why is it that person you think is more qualified to make that money? Why not you?
Yeah. And you can ask that at every point of the process too. I love it.
So true.
All right. And with that, Paul, we do have to end up here. It has been an absolute joy having you on.
Hey,
I know.
my pleasure.
Yeah, man, we'll have to have you come back and do another topic. This was fantastic. Thanks, man.
Yeah.
Let's do it whenever you want. Well, listen, if anybody wants to heckle me, I'm just Paul at StrataPT.com. Send all your hate mail my way. And but otherwise, yeah, I would love to chat about this. And I just think owning a physical therapy practice, I think, is probably one of the easier ways to make a shitload of money.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Actually,
any PT hearing that, replay that part because we've been saying it.
Yeah.
Yeah, you don't even have to create a market. I'll stop there. You don't even have to create a market.
Yeah.
Hey, thanks for having me on, guys.
No problem. And
Thanks, Paul.
thank you,
Appreciate
Paul.
it, man.
All right. See ya.
See ya.